Spend enough time perusing the assorted gaming channels on the tube of you, and you're guaranteed to come across a veritable cornucopia of distinct personalities, all of whom have openly celebrated the numerous iconic A-list franchises which have endured the test of time again and again. In addition to this, there are established scholars reveling in the discovery and conservation of what have been labeled as hidden gems. Games that are equally worthy of respect and adoration as the all-time greats, but due to a lack of advertising or mainstream attention in their prime, have fallen through the cracks and now reside in obscurity. Since then, these hidden gems have been thoroughly excavated, studied, and price gouged on eBay for what can sometimes amount to the same cost as a monthly car payment. Today, I'm focusing on the original PlayStation and delving even further into the depths to present what I define as Rough Diamonds. Titles that, while unable to secure their place at the cool kids table, are still absolutely worth checking out. They may be ugly, overly simplistic, or otherwise fundamentally flawed, but beneath all of this, there is something special about these games, a raw, pure element of fun that prevails above all else. In other terms, think of these like B- or C+ entries, where your head won't explode from overwhelming sheer awesomeness, but you'll still get one hell of a headache, in a good way. Our first entry is Floating Runner, released in early 1996, well before Super Mario 64, as a matter of fact. As this was still kind of uncharted territory for the genre's transition from 2D to 3D, the jumping mechanics and tank controls feel painfully limiting at first. I lost countless lives trying to line up the jumps and gauge the distances the first time I fired this thing up. Once you get a handle on the physics and momentum, there is a lot of, admittedly basic, fun to be had. Select either Lay or Cress, two cute, super deformed, and interchangeable heroes as you explore bright, colorful, and unexpectedly large stages. Collect gems, health, weapons, and take on all sorts of other cutesy enemies along the way. While the game's world borders on generic, with everything from a forest stage to a lava stage to an ice stage and everything in between, the level designs themselves do offer quite a bit of challenge, which weirdly betrays the kid-friendly appearance. And you'll have enemies flanking you almost constantly. You're going to need lots of determination to make it to the end, especially considering the total lack of checkpoints or a save feature. That's right, this is old school at its purest. You gotta do the entire playthrough in one session. The adventure is archaic, borderline ancient compared to the dazzling heights that platformers have reached in the 2.5 decades since its release. But it's often said that you gotta crawl before you can run. So why not try crawling with Floating Runner? Our second title is GT Software's Invasion from Beyond, a satirical send-up of schlocky cinema from the 1950s. An armada of UFOs have attacked the Earth's major cities, and only a brave handful of pilots with checkered pasts have the guts and gall required to repel and scatter these invaders back among the stars. Choose your ship, outfit it with weapons of your choosing, and take to the skies as a torrential downpour of enemy fire assails you from all directions. Don't forget, there is still a whole civilization beneath you that needs help, so it becomes absolutely vital that you rescue these civilians, soldiers, and scientists while also shooting down hostiles. After all, you aren't really saving the planet if there aren't any survivors, right? As a bonus, by rescuing people, you'll eventually earn upgrades to your ships, including bizarre alien weaponry that is more powerful than anything ever seen here at home. Be warned, the learning curve is almost a vertical line. The opening training missions are almost unfairly strict, with harsh conditions and short timers that will force you to redo them past the point of annoyance. The first few actual missions are brutal as well, as you're almost exclusively outgunned and overpowered. But if you're resistant, agile, and can think fast, you'll find a lot to like with this one. For starters, the graphics and frame rate are shockingly solid by PS1 standards. Even with a dozen ships and tons of explosions going on, the engine runs at an uncommonly smooth clip. In addition, the overall arcade feel is satisfying. I think of it like a mashup of Asteroids and Robotron 2084 with a late 90s coat of paint. The difficulty may turn off a lot of people. I'll admit it almost happens to me. But stick with it, and you'll find some satisfying spaceship shooting awaits you. Power Move Pro Wrestling is kind of the black sheep of mid-90s wrestling games. Everyone talks about the classic titles like WWF No Mercy or Terabad junk like WCW Thunder, but Power Move has more or less been cast aside and forgotten. My guess is because of its licensing issues. Initially, New Japan Pro Wrestling was attached to this game, but in the process of coming to the States, all of NJPW's real-life heavy hitters were swapped out with characters so bland it would make the cast of Matt Mania blush. It's too bad, because while this game has almost no polish whatsoever, the foundation is remarkably strong. You have everything from strikes, grapples and submissions to rope whips, super signature moves, and even turnbuckle attacks. The developers were a small team named Ukes, who you may or may not be aware officially became WWE's de facto choice for all of their games over roughly the next 20 years, from the very first SmackDown all the way to WWE 2K19. So yeah, they may know a thing or two of what makes a wrestling game work. And you'll find most of that knowledge here as well. Now, I'm not gonna lie and tell you that it's in the same esteemed company as the more celebrated titles in the medium, but if you can get some beers and like-minded friends to join, it's almost guaranteed that you'll have a great time. This next one's kind of a cheat, but I'm including it for posterity anyway. It's hard to imagine these days, but there was an age when Konami was a widely respected titan of the industry. And Konami Arcade Classics is a great collection of hits from yesteryear, where the fun never stopped as long as there were quarters in your pocket. While the collection's overall presentation kinda comes off as bargain basement quality, the content within more than makes up the difference. At your disposal, you have Huyan, Scramble, Yi-R Kung Fu, Rockin' Rope, Shaolin's Road, Circus Charlie, Super Cobra, Road Fighter, Time Pilot, and Gyrus. There's a healthy variety here, from space shooters to martial arts action to a pig firing arrows and meat at wolves tied to balloons. No matter what your preference is, there's something for everyone in this collection. I'm partial to Yi-R Kung Fu and Time Pilot myself, and Shaolin's Road is growing on me. One of these days I'm gonna get the high score on Circus Charlie, I just know it. Now there's a game that separates the boys from the clowns. In all seriousness, this is classic gaming in all its glory, and I'm here for every bit of it. Yeah, even Super Cobra. If you can't get to your local arcade or barcade, this is your next best bet. It's a retro game that celebrates even retro-er games. Talk about meta. Project Horned Owl is one of the very few light gun games released on the original PlayStation and got published by Sony themselves. What sets this one apart from the rest are the animated segments featuring characters designed by the legendary Masamune Shiro, creator of the iconic Ghost in the Shell franchise. The story is fairly standard for the genre, except instead of being traditional police officers, you're police officers in mechs who are in pursuit of a bionically upgraded megalomaniac who has a stranglehold on the city, as androids and technology everywhere lose control and go on a rampage. Blast your way past a half-dozen fairly lengthy missions, either alone or with a second player, as wave after wave of enemies engage you with increasing speed and ferocity. You have limited continues, and if you run out, it's back to the main menu, so keep your wits about you and your clip full. To maximize crowd control, you can charge up your regular shot and release a swath of bullets that's devastating to packs of smaller enemies, or lob a grenade and obliterate everything in your path. Obviously, these are limited, so use them sparingly. Each mission is topped off with large, cool-looking bosses, so study their patterns and stay on the offense. Between shootouts, you'll be treated to brief cinematics furthering the story and giving minor insights into the characters. Nothing mind-blowing, but a welcome breather and a chance to rest your trigger finger for a moment. Most players won't struggle too hard to reach the ending, as the experience is fairly brief overall. But if you're so inclined, you can crank the difficulty up several notches to the point that all but the sharpest reflexes will prevail. Pick this one up to revisit a genre that sadly doesn't get much love anymore. Speaking of arcade action, Ray Tracers is one for the books. A spiritual successor to Taito's Chase HQ, here you'll take to the streets in your souped-up cruiser, reaching breakneck speeds and ruthlessly knocking out criminals in relentless pursuit of your targets, a rogues gallery of high-tech war machines on the run. Your car is essentially invincible, so your main struggle is against the clock, as the bad guys are continually creating distance between you and them. Once that timer reaches 0, it's game over. So keep the pedal to the metal and your eyes on the prize. You also have a handy turbo boost at your disposal to even the odds. Don't burn through it all in one go, otherwise you may find yourself falling behind while the enemy's taillights fade. Instead, strategic boosts are the key to victory, particularly in the last few stages where your targets come close to breaking the sound barrier. More than anything, where this game excels is its intense sense of speed. Although the car models and stages are low-poly, low-res affairs, you still have a blistering frame rate that does an outstanding job at making you feel like you're a goddamn street missile, with brakes being more for decoration than practical use. Stage memorization becomes key, as certain maps expect you to skid into 60-degree turns at 200 miles an hour. Thankfully, you can pick from several different cars that cater to different play styles. So, if you prefer to be faster than a speeding bullet or more powerful than a locomotive, you'll find a ride that suits your skills. The most replay value you'll get is trying to beat your best times, and always aiming for that perfect run. Taito was churning out nothing but great stuff in the mid-90s, and I sincerely feel that they should get more recognition for it. Rising Zan, Samurai Gunman, is an experience like no other you'll find on the PlayStation. These days, we're spoiled for choices when it comes to quirky character action games, but this one is the granddaddy of them all. Playing as the super ultra sexy hero Zan, formerly known as Johnny, you've returned from your tutelage in Japan to clean up the streets of your hometown, pistol in one hand, sword in the other. Alternating between shooting and slicing, you'll be taking on a bizarre, colorful army of wooden men, ninjas, robots, and all sorts of ne'er-do-wells, in a series of increasingly wacky and challenging missions that will test all but the hardest of the hardcore. Truly, this game is no cakewalk, but once you master the more advanced techniques and combos, you'll stand a fighting chance. I hope your thumbs are dexterous, because every single stage features quick time events and boss-killing minigames that will give you blisters and make you break a sweat. To get the highest score possible, you gotta be a machine. The graphics and controls are admittedly on the rough side of the spectrum, but there's so much personality and strange fun to be had that it shines through the rough exterior. Personally, I didn't really start enjoying myself until about the third or fourth stage, but in my experience, perseverance paid off, because this may be the singular definition of a rough diamond on this list. Rising Zan is seriously one of a kind, and it had true guts for daring to be different in an era where that was looked down upon. Destrega is, without hyperbole, one of my favorite games on the original PlayStation. Published by Koei and developed by Omega Force, aka the Dynasty Warriors factory, this is the red-headed stepchild of their catalog. While the PS1 had an expansive list of fighting games, Destrega is one of the more standout entries you'll come across. Featuring a semi-cliché anime-style cast, you'll battle it out through uncommonly large arenas, casting spells at your opponents and using the environments to your advantage. More often than not, taking cover behind a pillar or under a bridge helped me snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. The coolest aspect of the combat is that you have 3 different methods of magic attacks: speed, power, and spread. There's a neat rock, scissors, paper element where one attack can either nullify or be nullified based on the attack you choose, which adds a whole extra layer of strategy to the proceedings. If you don't want to tangle with all of this sorcery nonsense, you can charge in headfirst and settle things with old-fashioned kick punching. However, this opens you up to devastating punishment, as the closer you get to your opponent, the more damage their magic does. I always love a good risk versus reward mechanic in games like this. It makes you never totally sure what to expect. The cherry on top is an uncharacteristically lengthy, not to mention fully and amusingly poorly voiced story mode that goes in depth to the universe these characters inhabit, explaining the source of their powers and how they affect the world as a whole. It's niche, but a noteworthy plus all the same. I'd love to see a modern sequel, especially with online functionality. There would be all sorts of amazing, epic fights to be seen once people got an understanding of the nuances Destrega offers. Although critics of its time would vehemently disagree, I give it my highest recommendation. This concludes our first roundup of Rough Diamonds, titles that aren't good enough to be iconic or to even be considered hidden gems, but which I still deem 100% worth your time, flaws and all. Remember, just because a game isn't traditionally good doesn't always mean it's bad. I've got several dozen games on various other systems lined up and ready to explore, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and check back soon. If you have any recommendations, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.